We're not talking about rocket science here. We're talking about simple tools to reach the world for Christ. But it works.
We've gone into each city intensively for 30 days, working closely with the churches on the ground, a symphony of media. 30 days saying that God gives you the power to change. Call this number. Everyone that calls the number, they get a 100-page tailor-made book for that city containing the most powerful testimonies of how God changed lives. Primetime television every night, back to back for 30 days. Same thing for radio, billboards, buses, trains.
Why are you on the board of directors?
Well, I was initially impressed with the kind of work that Great Commission Ministry, Media Ministries is doing, and considerably impressed with the courage and zeal that Hanno has and some of the others in the membership.
I've followed GCM for nearly 20 years now, and I believe it's one of the most effective, efficient organizations. And at the time I was invited to join the board was going through a transition. It had a lot of ministry background people, and I just felt that with my background in both ministry and in business that I could be helpful to Hannu.
We traveled with Hannu and just got to know him as a friend. And
good to know the background, the insight where your money goes, and that is for me, important.
Well, I think the issue goes back to a guy by the name of Brian Vaughan. he was instrumental in giving me a book that Hannu had written, and it got my heart.
Would you recommend Great Commission Media Ministries to those that want to achieve an effective result with their giving into kingdom work?
Great Commission Media is very effective and efficient in the way they go about helping fulfill the Great Commission. So I believe it deserves a good hard look from any potential investor as an option. And that because I think they can accomplish more with their money than with any other organization that I am aware of.
When I started to become interested in Great Commission Media, I took the trip and went to Finland, to the head office, met Laura there, and just saw how well they run that office. And it was a hands-on kind of a situation that I really like to see. There wasn't a lot of big bucks flying around anywhere. And that's basically where I got involved and said, this is an organization that I really want to support. And so we've done that.
we just really see Hannu's passion to fulfill the Great Commission, and just realize how impacting the ministry is.
We saw the benefit what Great Commission Media is doing all over the world. I am personally not a person to go there and give him a hand over there. But the only and the best thing when we giving some, then it goes to those directions where we feel we have the best buck for our investment.
A lot of businessmen, of course, think bottom line and bang for the buck, and I think that monies invested into the Great Commission are often looked in a similar way. Do you feel you're getting a good return on your kingdom investment with Great Commission Media Ministries?
Very definitely. And if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be here.
The city campaigns have a, just a unique way of getting into a lot of people's homes. And, yes, all ministry is costly, but at a price that is very reasonable, or at a cost, I should say, that is probably more affordable than any other way that I know of.
You're in business, you're making money. On the end of the day, you want to do something with it, but you want to do it in a certain way.
Well, dollar for dollar, I always believe that Great Commission Media is one of the most effective organizations I know. And that I believe that any investor in those projects is getting more bang for the buck than they could get just about anywhere else. And so I really believe it's efficient in that sense, and that's one of the attractions for me, for sure.
If only there was somewhere we could all get together and do something, anything, together, as one body. Is it even possible?
This is our chance to see the city experience the power of God's love.
There's no doubt that the backbone of Power to Change was the 1,400-odd call center volunteers that made up the call center of Power to Change. Volunteers were provided with adequate training to take calls coming in.
But the real work starts after the book is given to the caller. And I think if every church which partners in Power to Change sees that scope to go and reach out to that caller, because the caller there needs help. The caller there has a need, and the caller there doesn't know about Jesus. And that's the heart of the campaign.
What are your thoughts about our big, large mega city media campaigns like the one we did in Mumbai, India?
We traveled there. Yeah, we could just begin to see how they work and just how impacting, how effective they really are. And that's hard to talk about and put into words. But yeah, being there was really valuable for us, just to see how many people get to hear that message, and just how many people are involved in just all the facets of the campaign, the organizing, administering, the call center, and all of that is just really impacting to see all of that.
We went over to Mumbai, India to see that in progress, the Great Commission Media Ministry of Evangelism that was taking place there in India. And we spent a week there, and it was really a blessing to see how well it was run, how organized they were in a country that is high-tech, low-tech, and they were very high-tech in the way they had involved all the churches in Mumbai, that the Christian churches, they came on board, and how the churches grew because they got the people out of the pew, going out into the communities where the people were, as these people phoned in on their phone-in and asked for their books. And the people went out from the churches, delivered these books, and I could just see how well this was working and how well it was going to work around the world.
I'm very impressed that what is Hanno is doing in those directions. It is when you see the response, when you see the people what react on it in certain big cities, where you have Muslim cities where they're coming to the Lord. I think it is fantastic.
Recently, with a campaign in Beirut, that was extremely impressive.
I was just amazed, just absolutely amazed at what God was doing. Wherever we went, every billboard had the Power to Change message on the billboard, and I guess it was on radio and TV and just wherever you went. It was absolutely amazing to see the impact that it had, and then the reports for years later followed. And so I've always been a fan of the Mega City campaign. It's easy to get behind it. It's really quite amazing.
Now, you just mentioned the church, and we're referring to the local church in the city that we're targeting. How important do you believe that it is that the local church becomes the foundation of these campaigns?
Well, I think it's critical. I can't imagine a mega city campaign taking place without having local participation. It starts with prayer, because prayer is the primary ingredient of all Great Commission activity. So the local people have a burden for their city, a burden for the lost, and so they need to get involved in prayer and fasting and preparation. And the Mega City campaign is built on the fact that they can receive the Power to Change booklet. And so volunteers are needed to man the phone center, to deliver the booklets, to offer to meet with the people, hold events and activities following the campaign, to begin the discipleship process, to help them make the transition and help them begin their journey with God.
Our founder and president, Dr. Hannu Haukka, is a Christian leader and I would say a Christian statesman as well around the world. What would you say about his leadership and his effectiveness as a leader?
I probably can't begin to know or imagine all the commitments that he has. I know that he's well respected in many circles, many places in the broadcasting world.
Well, Hannu is a very unusual kind of a guy that is certainly around the world on a very regular basis and knows what's happening in the world.
Just impressed with how God has used Hannu in that ministry, and I have great respect for the way they are run. I've seen their operations, and it's very efficient, very effective. I was surprised that their offices were so small because their output is so big.
He's led of the Spirit in regards to when to move into a city or when not to, or to stop from going in because of political, geopolitical things that take place around the world.
Considerably impressed with the courage and zeal that Hannu has.
They're there to serve the Lord first and foremost, from personal salaries to the way they spend their money, their priorities.
He's a very down-to-earth guy. He'll stop and talk to anybody on the street and walk into your house, and just as a normal person. There's no air about him. So he's certainly been a blessing in our lives. Yeah, we just enjoyed getting to know him.
I think his nature is fisherman.
So it's always been a delight to connect with him. I always like to hear what God is doing around the world and to have a part in it.
And I think he's a great fisherman. The only thing what I can say, when the one time I went fishing with him, I beat him.
I guess you were fishing for salmon or trout.
Right.
But he's a fisher of men.
Like I say, I've known Hannu close to 20 years now, and I just love to follow what God is doing through him.
Have you read Hannu's book called Only Believe? Could you comment on the book, and would you recommend it to other businessmen to read that might inspire them to get involved with Great Commission Media Ministries?
Well, definitely I would recommend it to anybody to read. It's just a good story of how we all start small. Doesn't matter if you're in business or if you're in ministry, and then God starts to work through you and you can grow something. This has happened with Hannu and Laura. I mean, she's an integral part of that ministry, and it goes back to their days in Russia. An incredible story, and yeah, that's just what I love about it. You know, it started small and it's around the world today.
I would enthusiastically recommend that book to anybody that's a Christian, because it's extremely well read, extremely easy to read, and it points to the fantastic efforts been made in Russia and other parts of the world in the gospel through this ministry.
Yes, I like to hand out the book to anyone that's even remotely interested in reading about missions and ministry, because it's a story of God at work, particularly in the former Soviet Union. And it was just clear that God has worked there, and he used Hannu and the ministry that he was involved in for his purposes, to help fulfill the Great Commission. So to me, it's just a delightful story of God at work. So I recommend it to anyone and everyone.
What is your biblical philosophy that has caused you to be orientated towards giving so much to the kingdom work? Are you what I would call a stingy giver? Are you a generous giver? Do you give hilariously? Where do you stand on all of that?
Well, I could tell you the truth, or I could just tell you nice things. Which would you like to hear?
Well, my basis, of course, is the Word of God. And Matthew 28, go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Well, let's try the truth. I think that would always be...
All right. The truth is that, like the drunk from Alcoholics Anonymous said as he was getting along with this problem, they said, "How are you doing?" And he said, "I'm faking it till I make it."
Yeah.
So from my point of view, I theologically understand the benefit of giving, right?
Yes.
But I wouldn't characterize myself as the Apostle Paul mentioned about the Philippians, that they were hilarious givers. They gave with hilarity, a Greek word that indicates that there was tremendous enthusiasm and willingness.
No, I am not a stingy giver. I just want to shovel it out. We had a saying, and the saying was, God's scoop shovel is bigger than our scoop shovel.
I've given more from the point of view that I know it's the right thing to do.
And that's what basically motivates you and causes you to give what you do give.
It does.
From that perspective.
Yeah.
I probably see it a little different. You know, in terms of giving, I think it's as the Lord directs and as His Spirit guides. I just hope that I'm sensitive and listening to Him. And when the money's gone, when it's in His hands, it's in His work.
I could tell all kinds of stories about what happened when we thought we'd given a lot of money at one time, and the next day God's big scoop shovel come along. And so that was always exciting, you know, to see how God would answer us in these different areas when we gave.
Every day I see it. When we do what we're supposed to do, it comes back double and triple. Mm-hmm. And I think that is for the young businessman to realize. I never realized that myself when I was young.
That nickel that you got left in your bank account when the trumpet sounds and time shall be no more, it is going to be a plug nickel. That's what it is. It's a nothing. So let's give it now.
And then you can say, you give to be given? No. You give because your heart is there to give it. And what comes out later, that the Lord is going to look after that.
Where do I stand in regards to being hilarious? I'm excited about giving. Mm-hmm. I am.
And
I know you can't outgive God.
Amen. How would you challenge young entrepreneurs or young business people who want to go in business concerning their lives for Jesus and giving into His Great Commission work of evangelism, just as Matthew chapter 20, verse 19 and 20 command us to do as believers? What would you tell a young individual starting out?
Well, I do, as often as I can, challenge young people. You're just starting out. But I said, you got to start taking steps of faith and trusting God. And God's going to, if your heart is open to God and giving and supporting, God is just going to start pouring His blessing into your business. And so I just tell them, you can't outgive God. Make God the center, focal point of everything. Make God the center of everything, the focal point of your whole life, raising your children, your family situation, your business, all of that. Just put God first forever, and it works.
Well, I think the mindset of people that love to give is such that it's not how much you produce in life, whatever it is you produce, but it's how many people are in heaven because you produce those things. And so for a businessman that is committed to helping fulfill the Great Commission, one of the things they need to look at is, where do I place my investments and how do I get the largest return that I can possibly get on my dollar? Because what matters is what's left for eternity. the Great Commission wasn't our idea, it was the Lord's idea.
Now, why would you strongly suggest or encourage a Christian businessman to become part of this ministry, to invest into it, and the evangelism ministry that it represents, that basically we conduct around the world?
Well, Brian, I'd probably suggest that if a businessman has substantial dollars that he's looking to invest in Great Commission activity, that he would go on one of these mega city projects, visit it for himself and measure it for himself on its effectiveness and efficiency. That's the best way to judge, and just not to take my word for it, but to go out and experience it and see God at work. And there's nothing like having a front row seat watching God at work. And that's what happens when you go on one of these mega city projects.
Yeah.
And so I'd encourage every businessman that is looking to invest in the Great Commission to take a look at this, but look at it firsthand. Because I'm just totally convinced that dollar for dollar, there are very few organizations that can match this, because the whole focus of Great Commission Media is evangelism. But it has a strong discipleship component built into it, and that's why they work through the churches. They only are involved in megacity campaigns where the church has invited them to and is committed to providing volunteers and for training and all the stuff that's involved in it. So there is a lot of depth built into it. But again, I suggest an investor take a look at it firsthand rather than just listening to me or to you talk about it. Go see for yourself. Make your own judgment.
From a business perspective, how did business start for you? And what is your training, your background that put you into the business in the first place?
Brian, something you should know is that I was DNA'd to farm, and just from a young kid right through my whole life, I just want to be in the earth. So that's kind of my basis for the whole thing.
We grew up on a small family farm. My parents, they came as immigrants from both from Russia when they were very young, and so we grew up with that heritage.
I bought a blowtorch with a hole in it when I was about 8 years old and fixed the hole, and then I had a blowtorch and I could melt lead and make little molds and things like this. And I was working with chemicals too. I was trying to kill myself with chemicals that I was trying to make into explosives and things like that. And I was always extremely, even from a child, interested in technologies of any kind. And so I loved engines and cars and boats and these sort of things. And so it was just a natural inclination on my part to want to do this, so that the possibility came that I could have a shop and build big machines like this. That would be the thing that would be very attractive to me.
Well, it was probably the school of hard knocks. Mm-hmm. That's the way we got going. And having taken over this little business from my dad, we had learned at his feet, but it was just straight trusting God and He leading us. That was the bottom line.
There was no formal training.
No.
It was all on the job.
Yeah.
Learned as we went.
Sure.
Trial and error.
Yeah.
A lot of that. A lot of error.
Yes.
Some trials.
I grew up in the country with my dad was a farm worker, and from there I went to horticulture school.
I graduated from university with a degree in business administration and economics, and of course I knew it all at that point in time.
By the time I got to be 40 years of old, I'd had experience in a number of disciplines, which I often found once I'd partially mastered the discipline, I became bored with it and would move off to try and find something else where I wasn't bored. And so at 40, I asked the Lord one day in prayer, why I should live such a frustrating life of never finding contentment with anything. And in prayer, I had a message from the Lord in my heart that He said, well, what would you like to do with your life? And I said, well, I would like to build fine-looking, large machinery and then sell it.
I came out of the army and started my own business in a small greenhouse.
And I joined my parents as a partner in manufacturing business and helped that business grow from a mom and pop kind of operation to a small family corporation from a handful of employees to over 70 during the 10 years I was there.
Well, in 1962, my brother and I formed Heppel's Brothers Company and began. We had at that time a 30 cow herd, 1,000 turkeys, and maybe 10 acres of potatoes. So that's how small we were when we started.
Eventually, when I was 18, I was able to buy some of my first property. And at that time, basically I began to work with my oldest brother. He was 8 years older than I and had, he had acquired some land, some equipment.
From there I grew out from 300 square meter to 2.5 acre. And in 1979 we rebuilt everything. We put new greenhouses in, and we had 2.5 acre state of the art. And in 81 we stepped on the plane and we came to Canada to start our new future. There in Canada I became a partnership with some other business people, and from there I built up Western Lettuce up to 14 acres, and in 1986 I acquired a piece of land that was laying right beside it, where I started in 87. Plant propagating business, what grew out to the 45 acres what it is now.
So I rented a shop and started to build my first machine. And I had sold a small machine shop that I had, and I had a little bit of capital, not very much, but I got started in 1973 and built my first press, and then sold that and subsequently built more, until finally we grew up to the point where we had 3 factories in the United States, 2 in Canada and 1 in China.
I left to start a business again in the financial industry, and the Lord chose to really bless that. And it was early in those days when I decided that I'd start a charitable foundation myself.
Probably 600-700 acres of potatoes, 100 and some odd acres of squash, and it all goes to the local markets here, the Safeways, the Overweighties, Superstore. So that's the markets that we supply, and this is just growing in the last few years, and it's been really good.
Do you have any market that is outside of Canada, or like exports, or is it all right in Canada?
It's all in Canada. We do run the plant year-round. We package stuff from the U.S. for the local buyers, your Overweighties, your Safeways and Costco's. So we do a lot of packaging for those people on our plant.
There's a new potato chip on the market that I observe when I go into the supermarket that is called Hard Bites, and I know it's connected to you in some way. They probably use your product.
Hard Bite is right across Canada now, and they are doing very well. They do potatoes, parsnips, beets, and carrots, and it's taken off very well.
Tell us about your poultry operation that's part of the farming.
Yeah, my dad had turkeys, just a few, and we killed them all at Christmas and sold them to the butcher shops. And then when my brother and I took over and started, we started moving into selling to the killing plants, and we started expanding. And so right now, today, we have broiler chicken and turkey. 110,000 broilers every 8-9 weeks, and that's 6 times a year. We probably grow about 600,000 male turkey. We grow all male. It's all on a tonnage base, so we chose to do this years ago, and it's worked well for us. Most of our product goes for further processing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, luncheon meats, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We farm in about 5 locations now, averaging around 12,000 acres.
12,000 acres times 5. That's a lot of acres. What product or products do you produce?
Primarily it's wheat and canola, grass seed, and we have livestock, some livestock.
And thanks, Ron. Thanks, Jack.
Oh, you're welcome.
I appreciate your time, Don. Thanks, Ted. And I just pray that the blessings of the Lord be upon you, upon your family, and may you come to meet Jesus and hear those wonderful words from Jesus. Well done, my good and faithful servant.
Thank you, Brian.
Well, that's a nice prospect.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. He's fallen asleep.